The dust motes danced in the afternoon sun, slanting through the attic window, illuminating forgotten corners of our shared history. I was searching for an old photo album, the one with pictures from our trip to Italy, before the kids, before the mortgage, before the quiet accumulation of years had settled over us like a fine layer of that same dust. My hand brushed against a shoebox tucked behind a stack of old yearbooks, not one I recognized. It wasn't Olivia's usual meticulous labeling style, just plain cardboard, slightly crushed on one corner. Curiosity, simple and unburdened at first, made me pull it out. It felt light. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded tissue paper, lay a necklace. Not just any necklace. This was significant. A string of diamonds, small but impeccably cut, glittered with a cold, hard fire that seemed alien in the attic's musty dimness. It wasn't ostentatious, but it radiated expense, the kind of understated luxury that costs more than my car. I lifted it, the cool weight settling into my palm. It wasn't mine. I certainly hadn't bought it. My gifts to Olivia tended towards the practical, the sentimental, a first edition of her favorite book, a weekend getaway to that little inn by the lake, the antique locket she wore on our anniversary. This diamond necklace belonged to a different world, a world I didn't inhabit. A prickle of unease started beneath my ribs. Olivia hadn't mentioned a new necklace. She hadn't worn it. Why was it hidden here, in a random shoebox, pushed to the back of the attic, like a secret? My mind scrambled for innocent explanations. A gift from her mother? No, her mother's taste ran more towards chunky turquoise. An inheritance from a distant relative? Unlikely, and surely she would have told me. A work bonus? Olivia worked hard as a senior marketing manager, and her company did reward top performers. But this felt beyond a standard corporate perk. It felt personal, expensive, secret. I carefully placed the necklace back in the box, tucking the tissue paper around it, my fingers suddenly clumsy. I pushed the box back into its hiding place, the dust swirling in its wake. But the image of those glittering stones was burned into my mind, a cold counterpoint to the warm nostalgia I'd been seeking. Downstairs, the house felt different. The familiar ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed louder, each tick measuring a new, uncomfortable silence. Olivia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She looked up and smiled as I entered, the same easy smile she'd given me for 20 years. "Find the album?" she asked, turning back to stir something on the stove. Her profile was outlined against the kitchen window, familiar and beloved. "No, not yet," I managed, my voice sounding almost normal. Got sidetracked. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. She wore a simple silk blouse, one I hadn't seen before. It draped elegantly, catching the light. Had that been a recent purchase, too? When had our finances become separate enough that a silk blouse or a diamond necklace could appear without my knowledge? We had joint accounts for household expenses, but we'd always maintained a degree of personal financial freedom. Still, this felt different. "Anything interesting up there?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Just dust," I said, forcing a smile. "Lots and lots of dust." That night, as we sat watching television, the usual comfortable silence between us felt charged. I kept glancing at her neck, imagining the cool weight of those diamonds against her skin. Who had bought it for her, and why was she hiding it? Olivia scrolled through her phone, a small frown creasing her brow. She'd become more attached to her phone lately, tilting the screen away slightly when I came near, silencing notifications quickly. I'd put it down to work pressures, the constant demands of her clients. Her firm handled accounts for several high-net-worth individuals and luxury brands. Long hours and constant availability were part of the package. Or so I'd told myself. Now, every ping seemed suspicious. Every late night at the office, every vaguely explained client dinner took on a new, sinister meaning. Was the necklace from one of them? A wealthy client showing inappropriate appreciation? Or was it something more? The thought felt like a betrayal in itself, a betrayal of the trust I thought was the bedrock of our marriage. We had built a life together, brick by careful brick. 2 children, now mostly grown, a comfortable home, shared jokes, intertwined histories. Could something so fundamental be threatened by a hidden box in the attic? I remembered our wedding day. Olivia radiant, her eyes fixed on mine, full of promises. I remembered the lean years, working side by side, celebrating small victories. I remembered holding her hand in the hospital waiting room, the shared fear and relief. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, solid in hand. As Olivia finally put her phone down and curled up against my side, her familiar warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my stomach, I felt a chasm open within me. On one side was the life I knew, the woman I loved, the history we shared. On the other was a glittering necklace hidden in the dark, and the terrifying questions it represented. I held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, while my mind raced, searching for a path back to the uncomplicated trust I'd felt just hours before, suspecting, with a sickening certainty, that the path might already be gone. I knew, even as I held her close, that I couldn't leave the box unopened, metaphorically speaking. The truth, whatever it was waiting in the shadows cast by those diamonds. The days following my discovery in the attic were shrouded in a fog of quiet vigilance. Every interaction with Olivia felt like navigating a minefield. I was hyper-aware of her tone, her gestures, the flicker of her eyes. The easy comfort we once shared had evaporated, replaced by a tense, unspoken awareness on my part, and an unnerving, almost brittle cheerfulness on hers. She started dressing differently, subtly at first. More silk blouses like the one I'd noticed, skirts that seemed a fraction shorter, shoes with a higher heel. She attributed it to needing to up her game for client meetings, but it felt performative, aimed at an audience I wasn't sure included me anymore. Her laughter, once a sound that warmed me, now sometimes struck me as too bright, too quick, a deflection rather than genuine mirth. Her phone became a permanent extension of her hand. Texts would arrive late at night, met with a mumbled, "just work." She took calls in other rooms, closing the door softly behind her, emerging minutes later with a vague explanation about a demanding client or a project deadline. I saw the name Patrick flash briefly on her lock screen once or twice before she quickly swiped it away. Patrick. The name meant nothing to me, yet it lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. I wrestled with myself constantly. Confront her? Demand answers? The thought sent waves of nausea through me. What if I was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation for the necklace, the phone calls, the subtle shifts in her behavior? Accusing her would be an irreparable breach, a wound our marriage might not survive, even if my suspicions were baseless. But the alternative, living with this gnawing uncertainty, this constant suspicion poisoning every moment, felt equally unbearable. I started paying closer attention to our finances online, justifying it as simple household management. There were small, regular withdrawals from her personal account, listed under generic codes. Nothing overtly alarming on its own, but cumulatively they added up. And then there were the credit card statements. Dinners at expensive restaurants I hadn't been to, charges from boutique hotels in the city, listed as business travel, but the dates didn't always align with trips she'd mentioned. One charge stood out, a high-end jewelry store dated 3 months prior. The amount was significant, easily enough to cover the diamond necklace hidden in the attic. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. Patrick, the late nights, the hidden necklace, the hotel charges. It wasn't a demanding client. It wasn't a work bonus. It was another man, a wealthy man, judging by the gifts and venues. The urge to confront her immediately was overwhelming, a white-hot surge of anger and betrayal. But I held back. What would it achieve? Tears? Denials? More lies? I needed clarity, not just for myself, but for the wreckage this would inevitably cause. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Olivia was away for a weekend conference, a real one this time, confirmed by her company newsletter. Left alone in the quiet house, the silence amplified my turmoil. I found myself drawn back to the attic, the shoebox feeling heavier now, weighted by the certainty of its contents. I took out the necklace again, the diamonds cold against my skin. Driven by a grim resolve, I went to her home office. Her laptop sat closed on the desk. We had always respected each other's privacy, but privacy felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. My heart pounded as I opened it. It wasn't password protected, another small sign of how secure she must have felt in her deception. Her email inbox was open. I hesitated, feeling like a trespasser in my own life. But the image of the necklace, the name Patrick, the hotel bills, they pushed me forward. I searched for his name. The emails were there, dozens of them, stretching back months, maybe longer. Not work emails. These were intimate, filled with shared jokes, plans for secret meetings, declarations that made my stomach clench. They spoke of clandestine lunches, weekend afternoons stolen while I thought she was working late, gifts exchanged. The necklace was mentioned. A small token, he'd called it. Small. There were references to his wealth, his influence, the excitement Olivia felt being part of his world, a world apparently more thrilling than the one we had built together. Reading those messages felt like watching our life crumble in slow motion. Each word was a hammer blow against the foundation of trust we had shared for 2 decades. The woman who wrote those emails, who spoke of deception with such casual ease, felt like a stranger wearing my wife's face. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was a complete repudiation of our shared history, our vows, the very essence of our partnership. He wasn't just a lover, he was an escape, a symbol of a life she apparently craved more than the one she had with me. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. There was no anger left, just a vast, hollow emptiness. The fog of suspicion had lifted, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving light of truth. When Olivia returned from her conference, flushed with success and bearing small gifts for me and the kids, who were away at college, I felt nothing. The charade was over. That evening, after a dinner eaten in near silence, my silence born of grief, hers perhaps of oblivious contentment or practiced deception, I waited until the house settled. She was getting ready for bed, humming that same soft tune she'd hummed in the kitchen days before, a lifetime ago. I walked into our bedroom. She looked up from brushing her hair, a questioning smile on her face. I didn't speak. I simply walked over to her jewelry box on the dresser, opened the hidden shoebox I'd retrieved from the attic earlier, and placed the diamond necklace on top, the stones glittering under the lamplight. Her hand froze mid-air, the hairbrush hovering. The color drained from her face. Her eyes darted from the necklace to me, wide with panic, then flickered with a desperate attempt at comprehension, denial, and finally, dawning realization. The humming stopped. The air grew thick, heavy. "Where?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The attic," I said, my voice flat, devoid of accusation or anger, just numb. "Hidden, like your emails with Patrick, like the hotel charges, like everything." She sank onto the edge of the bed, the hairbrush clattering to the floor. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There were no tears, no dramatic denials. In her eyes I saw the collapse of her carefully constructed deception. She knew I knew. "How long, Olivia?" I asked, the question hanging between us. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She stared at her hands, twisting in her lap. "A year," she finally mumbled. "Maybe a little more." A year. A year of lies, of stolen moments, of living a double life, while I remained oblivious, trusting. The hollow feeling inside me intensified, carving out my insides. "Was any of it real?" I asked, gesturing vaguely around the room, encompassing our life, our history. "The last year? The last 20 years?" She looked up then, tears finally welling in her eyes. "It was," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Us. It was real. I got lost. It was exciting, different. I never meant to—" "Don't," I interrupted, holding up a hand, not harshly, but with a finality that surprised even myself. "Don't try to explain. Don't try to justify. It doesn't matter anymore." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for more than half my life, and saw only the chasm between us, littered with the wreckage of broken trust. The necklace lay on the dresser, a cold, glittering symbol of everything that had been destroyed. "I can't do this," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I can't live like this, knowing what I know, wondering what else is hidden." She started to cry then, quiet, racking sobs. "Please," she choked out, "we can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do anything." But the foundation was gone. The structure we had built together had been compromised beyond repair. You can patch cracks, but you can't rebuild trust once it's been systematically demolished. "No," I said softly, but firmly, "we can't." I turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving her there with the necklace and the ruins of our marriage. I went downstairs and sat in the dark living room, the grandfather clock ticking steadily in the hall, each tick marking the end of one life and the terrifying, uncertain beginning of another. The house felt vast and empty around me, filled with the ghosts of shared memories, now tainted by betrayal. I didn't know what the future held, whether it was forgiveness or separation, rebuilding alone or finding a new path. But sitting there in the darkness, surrounded by the life we had built, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. it would never be the same. The trust was gone, shattered like glass, and some things, once broken, can never truly be made whole again. The road ahead was shrouded in fog, but for the first time since finding that box, the path, though painful, felt like my own to choose. The days that followed were a blur of strained silence and aching emptiness. We moved through the house like ghosts, occupying the same space, but existing in separate, parallel universes, defined by her guilt and my grief. I slept in the guest room, the physical distance a small comfort against the vast emotional chasm that had opened between us. Olivia tried to talk, her voice often thick with unshed tears, her apologies stumbling over each other. She spoke of mistakes, of loneliness, of feeling unseen, of the intoxicating allure of Patrick's attention and wealth. I listened, not because I believed her excuses could mend what was broken, but because some part of me needed to understand the why, even if the understanding brought no solace. Her explanations felt flimsy, justifications woven after the fact. The core of it remained. She had made a choice repeatedly over many months to betray the life we had built. She had chosen secrecy, deception, and another man over honesty, commitment, and me. The excitement she chased came at the cost of my trust, our shared future. "I know I don't deserve it," she said one evening, standing hesitantly in the doorway of the guest room, her face pale and drawn. "But please, don't throw away 20 years. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes, the fear of losing the comfortable life she had taken for granted. But I didn't see genuine remorse for the pain caused, only regret for being caught. Maybe that was unfair. Maybe my own hurt blinded me, but the distinction felt critical. Trust, once incinerated, couldn't be rekindled with apologies alone. It needed a foundation that no longer existed. "It's not about throwing away 20 years, Olivia," I replied, my voice weary. "Those years happened. They are part of our story. But the story changed the moment you chose to hide that necklace, the moment you started lying. This isn't about punishment. It's about consequence. I can't unknow what I know. I can't unfeel this betrayal." The hardest part was telling the children. They were young adults, perceptive and already navigating their own complex lives. We told them together, a united front in fracture. Olivia cried. I spoke calmly, focusing on the fact that this was about the relationship between their parents, not about our love for them. Seeing the confusion and pain in their eyes was a fresh wave of agony, a stark reminder of the collateral damage her choices had inflicted. They deserve better than a family fractured by deceit. After that conversation, my resolve solidified. Staying together, trying to paste over the gaping wounds with therapy and forced forgiveness, felt like a different kind of lie. A lie to myself, to Olivia, and to our children. It would mean living in a house haunted by suspicion, where every late night, every unanswered text would trigger the phantom pain of betrayal. I deserved peace, even if it meant walking away from the life I had known. I contacted a lawyer, a measured woman named Eleanor, recommended by a colleague. Sitting in her quiet, book-lined office felt surreal, like stepping formally into a future I hadn't chosen but now had to navigate. We discussed options, timelines, the division of assets, the cold, practical dismantling of a shared life. There was no anger in the process, just a profound sadness and a quiet determination to move forward with dignity. Olivia accepted my decision with a resignation that spoke volumes. Perhaps, deep down, she knew it was inevitable. The fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a heavy sorrow. We began the slow, painful process of separating our lives, dividing possessions that held decades of memories, untangling finances that had been interwoven for years. The diamond necklace remained on her dresser, untouched, a silent testament to the catalyst of our ending. I told her to keep it, sell it, throw it away. It held no meaning for me anymore, beyond being the first tangible clue to a truth I couldn't ignore. Months later, I moved into a small apartment overlooking a park. It was spare, filled with only the essentials, but it felt clean, uncluttered by the weight of the past. Some days were harder than others. Memories would ambush me. The scent of Olivia's perfume on an old scarf I found packed away, a song on the radio that was our song, the echo of her laughter in an empty room. Grief isn't linear. It ebbs and flows, recedes and crashes, unexpectedly. But slowly, incrementally, peace began to seep back in. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into my work with renewed focus, spent weekends hiking trails that cleared my head. I learned to sit with the silence, not as an emptiness, but as a space for reflection, for rediscovering myself outside the context of us. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand Olivia's choices, but I've stopped trying to excavate the why. Acceptance isn't about condoning, it's about acknowledging reality and choosing not to let it define you. Her betrayal was a chapter in my life, a painful, transformative one, but it wasn't the whole story. The ending of our marriage wasn't the ending of me. It was, in its own agonizing way, a new beginning. Standing at my apartment window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a quiet sense of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine, and for the first time in a long time I felt ready to walk it.